Greetings and welcome to Mount Olympus. I am Hercules Invictus, and tonight we have Brian's Drive-In Theater with Brian Walker. And tomorrow is his birthday, so an early happy birthday, Brian.
Thank you so much, Hercules. I appreciate that.
And I hear we're discussing film noir tonight.
We are, and it's one of my favorite film genre. I grew up on it. In the 1970s, especially with the superstation WTBS out of Atlanta, when it first hit cable in mid to late 70s, I want to say. TBS ran all kinds of noir titles, things that I had never seen before. And I was a pretty busy kid at the time, but as much as I could, especially if it was a rainy Saturday morning, they would run great noir titles at least through lunchtime or so. I would always try to pick them up or to catch them. And probably what we need to do first is to define what film noir is. We were talking before the segment started, and Hercules, you don't. It's not a film genre that you're all that familiar with, right?
Now, I'm familiar with the look of film noir, and I like the look of film noir, and several modern pictures have successfully captured it.
True, very true.
Comic books tend to go
Yeah.
back. So visually, I like it. It works well with horror. It works well with detective stories. Um, but I never really got into the genre like I have with sword and sandal cinema or horror or science fiction. Those are generally the areas where I hang out.
Well, there are a lot of people these days who really like these true crime TV shows that you find on streaming services and in some of the networks as well. And I find that a lot of true crime buffs also love noir films because the plot's usually centered around some sort of criminal activity. It might be a heist, or it might be a murder mystery or something like that. But that's sort of the hallmark of noir, is that some sort of crime has been committed, and then the rest of the film is sort of the collateral damage. You sort of watch people die one by one after that. And there's a shocking body count in a lot of noir films. They really have their origins, I think, and please keep in mind that this is my definition of film
Mhm.
noir. A lot of people have their own definitions, but this is the one that I have developed in my head over the years, the one that works for me. I think noir has its origins in several different film genre of their own. Greg and I were talking about this earlier tonight. The gangster pictures from the 1930s, those are a good place to start. The Edward G. Robinson and James Cagney films. Um, some of those are really where it sort of comes from. But there's more to film noir than just saying, well, it's a crime drama or it's a melodrama. You also see in film noir a lot of the types of movies, the melodramas that we did see pre-code Hollywood in the early 1930s. Films starring Barbara Stanwyck. Ricardo Cortez was a big pre-code Lothario. A lot of these traits from these different film genre kind of wind up impacting film noir. The mysteries of the 1930s, Mr. Moto mysteries, and that sort. But also the Perry Mason mysteries from 1930s. There was never one actor that stuck with Perry Mason, the series of films. A lot of different actors did it. Um, but there's some of that in there as well. And with the inception of World War II, and then seeing the real horror of wars really changed a lot of film genres. It changed horror, definitely. Whereas vampires and you know uh, man-made men, I guess it's what you can call Frankenstein
Yeah.
Whereas that scared people in the 1930s, and by the middle of the 40s, everybody had seen so many horrors in life that I just don't think that was so frightening. And you really see a big turn in noir post World War II. Toward the end of it, there's a big switch. It got much darker. Body counts got much higher. And one other thing about noir films is that none of the characters are usually all that likable.
Hmm.
They all have huge character flaws. That's not to say that you can't empathize with them. You can. But there's a lot of greed, a lot of avarice, things that you're not. Mm, personality attributes that you're not supposed to have, but everybody does.
Hmm.
It's just that some people have more of it than others. Um, and I think that's one of the things that makes the films so much fun is that there is a central character, there is a protagonist, and you might be rooting for the protagonist, but you're seeing the protagonist do some pretty horrible things, you know. Uh, so it's sometimes kind of hard to root for the protagonist. But that's one of the things I like about the genre is that there's no one perfect. Your hero has feet of clay. It's very different from let's say peplum films where
Right.
while your hero you might have some character flaws or some personality flaws, overall the hero is doing what the hero thinks is best for the collective good. Nobody's doing that in film noir. Everybody is out for themselves, and they're just a lot of fun. um, there are a lot of really well-known film noir titles that everybody knows, such as Casablanca, the 1942 Warner Brothers film with Humphrey Bogart, and Ingrid Bergman, and Paul Henreid, um, Peter Lorre, who did a surprising number of noir films. Peter Lorre and by the way, I have a Peter Lorre page at the drive-in. Um, Oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this too, I always think of Peter Lorre as more of a horror actor, and in the latter part of his career, he was in a lot of horror
Yes, he
films.
was.
But I, along with a lot of other people, I think, tend to forget that he was in a lot of noir titles, and some of the best ones at that. He's in the Maltese Falcon, and he's brilliant in the Maltese Falcon. He plays a gay character in it. They allude to it without saying in the film, but his calling card, for example, when Humphrey Bogart's secretary gives it to him, is scented with gardenia. And that is when you're introduced to Peter Lorre's character. And he has a very, in the Maltese Falcon, which is a brilliant movie. Mary Astor is the femme fatale. Practically every film noir has a very flawed female character in it. Usually one driven solely by money or revenge. Sometimes that's kind of characteristic of the femme fatale. But the femme fatale is always such an interesting character in film noir. And oftentimes in 30s, 40s, and 1950s movies, you didn't see a lot of strong female characters, but if you did, it was probably in film noir, because that's where you could be, a really tough, female who is, you know, uh, trying to make it on her own, in the world, and maybe she's committing crimes left and right and killing people, but hey, representation is representation, and very hard to come back then.
Frank
And
Miller's Sin City was a very noir film. It had a very noir
yes,
feel to it. I didn't catch the sequel yet, but I enjoyed the original Sin City.
mhm. L.A. Confidential comes to mind too. Now that's an old film at this point. I think it came out in '97, but it was done very much in the style noir. And it stars Guy Pearce, Russell Crowe, Kim Basinger, um, and there's another actor in there that I'm forgetting, unfortunately. I actually saw that at the theater and was kind of blown away by it. I wasn't expecting, straight up noir. I was just interested in the cast list, why we went to see it. Um, and there's well, another film that's really old now, but is noir, is Chinatown, with Jack Nicholson, excuse me.
Definitely.
We've been watching a lot of sports lately. Jack Nicholson, not Jack Nicholas. Uh, Faye Dunaway, one of my favorite actresses. In the '60s and '70s, she could do no wrong. She can. I I hear that she's not the most pleasant person on earth, but she sure could turn in a performance. She's in some of my favorite '70s movies. One of them is Chinatown, and she plays just a really interesting, twisted role in it. Um, but just a really strong performance. I I saw that movie at the theater when I was about 9 years old.
Wow.
Even though I didn't quite understand all of it at the time, it still kind of blew me away. Big fan of the movie. Of course, you mentioned you like the lighting and use of shadows in
Yes.
titles. Initially, it was a black and white effort. They tended to be lower budget films, and they were shot pretty quickly with fairly Spartan sets. There wasn't a whole lot of set dressing in a lot of noir films because that costs money and it also takes up a lot of time. And if you're trying to rotate, productions through your sound stages, you're trying to do it quickly. So a lot of noir was the look of it. The angles at which shadows were cast by the lighting, and the shadowing that you would see, the main characters lit up in. Oftentimes, the femme fatale, the first time you see her on camera, you don't get to see all of her. You just get to see kind of a slice of it. Just where the light catches. And it's very mysterious. It is great to enhance mystery. It's a fantastic mood setter for those films. The lighting can translate to color films. There are color noirs that I think are beautifully done. We just talked about Chinatown. That's one of them. But you also see it in some horror films as well. And there's a bit of horror in noir, especially the stuff that was made after World War II. Like I said, some of them have body counts and every bit as high as any horror film that I've ever seen.
In,
Um,
in
and
superheroes, Batman has a lot of noir elements, various
yes,
Batman films.
that is a great point. I hadn't even thought of that, but you are 100% correct. Batman is sort of dark and brooding and mysterious. I mean, you don't really get a big window into his past, and that's sort of another hallmark of film noir. Everybody's got something to hide, and the face that everyone puts on is generally not reflected in that person's background. Um, so you don't really know who to trust in it. Well, actually, you do know. Actually, with most noir films, you can't really trust anybody. And I think that the Maltese Falcon really drives that one home. You're prepared to, as you're watching it, you're prepared to, oh, Humphrey Bogart's a good guy, and no, he's as terrible as everybody else in it. He's as horrible as Mary Astor, who is truly, I mean, she's a great actress in this role, but in the Maltese Falcon, she's a terrible human being. Maybe the worst person in the film in terms of morality, maybe the worst. Peter Lorre and Sidney Greenstreet. I don't know if you remember the character actor Sidney Greenstreet, very, very large, imposing. figure.
Not that much, not offhand. I'm sure if I see
Okay.
a picture, I'll recognize him, but I don't, I can't associate the name with an image.
Well, if my reading of the Maltese Falcon is correct, Sidney Greenstreet and Peter Lorre are a couple.
Okay.
That's the way it reads to me on film. I think it's more than just hinted at, and they squabble like a couple as well. You know, they're not. Whenever they argue, it's not like two friends arguing. They're squabbling like two people who were in a relationship. Um, and like I said, if I ever wanted to just pick one film to define the genre, I would pick The Maltese Falcon, which is actually fairly early into film noir. Um, I gotta say though, some of my favorite noir titles actually come in the 50s when it really kind of gelled, when it really came together. One point I did want to make though before I forget about it is that my love of the Italian giallo is pretty well documented at this point. I love those films from the 60s and 70s. I think the Italians did a great job with it. And those are sort of a mashup of film noir and horror,
Mhm.
uh, essentially. And a lot of the lighting techniques that you see in giallos, you also see are clearly lifted from film noir titles. So you can tell that Mario Bava, for example, his film Blood and Black Lace, the use of shadows, it is just directly lifted from you know, the best of the Warner Brothers noirs. And he uses it so effectively. Now, Blood and Black Lace is in color, but he, I think, sort of led the way. He sort of taught people that this is how you can light a noir using color film stock. Um, it does work really well with black and white. It does set the mood. It's very atmospheric, but it
Mhm.
can be done with color. I think it is harder to do with color, but I think it can be done quite effectively. Every bit as effectively as black.
Yeah, I'm thinking of things that I'm familiar with, and it is pretty much the lighting. Even the Batman cartoon that it lasted for a number of years, that was phenomenally noir
Yes.
and on shadows. That was in color too, but still was filmed like an old black and white series.
Well, it, for me, there's almost something comforting about good noir film. Um, and noir sort of wound up on television. Quite honestly, I'm a huge Perry Mason fan, and Greg is too. Every day we watch one or two episodes, or well, I don't, but he does, one or two episodes of Perry Mason. Um, Perry Mason was on for I think 9 seasons or 10 seasons, something like that, and practically every character actor in Hollywood rotated through the cast list. A lot of noir actors also appeared on Perry Mason. Raymond Burr did a lot of film
Hmm.
noir. Barbara Hale, Della Street, was in several noir titles. William Hopper, he didn't really do that much noir. He did more horror films than anything else. Um, but still, he got away with it. William Talman, who portrayed Hamilton Berger, the DA who was always at loggerheads with Perry
Yes.
Mason in the courtroom. He's in one of my favorite noir films called The Hitchhiker. And he's the villain in it. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean he is the villain in it. He's the hitchhiker that they really shouldn't that Edmund O'Brien really shouldn't have picked up. So, it's a great movie though. Um, and but well, I have other noir titles that I'm a big fan of. Obviously, I love the Maltese Falcon. Um, a B, well, gosh, it's not even a B movie. Producers Releasing Corporation, otherwise known as PRC, was sort of the bottom of the barrel when it comes to film studios in the 1940s. But they released one of the most popular noir titles of the 1940s. It's called Detour. It is public domain now. I do run it whenever Tom Neal's birthday comes up because Tom Neal's the star of Detour. It's only about 60 minutes long. It's a pretty short film, but really interesting in the way it's done. It was shot in about a week, and since a lot of noir films were lower budgeted, the shooting schedules were much faster. Yeah, some of them were shot in 2 or 3 weeks. Casablanca, I think, was shot in a month, and that was kind of pushing it, as I recall. And Jack Warner was tired of he did not suffer fools gladly, and not that these people were fools by any means, but he watched the bottom line and he made them wrap up Casablanca before they were really done with it. But he just said this picture ends on Tuesday. You get all the shooting done, and that's it. So noir films are shot quickly, and that kind of films that are shot quickly, the line delivery, and there's a sense of immediacy about
Uh,
the way the characters deliver the lines. And when it comes to crime dramas or noir, that works very well. you know, you're trying to get everything in as quickly as possible, and you're trying to turn the set over, so you don't have a lot of furniture on the set. But you can take care of all of it with a fan and a well-placed light, or perhaps a vertical, or I'm sorry, mini blinds and a well-placed light can add a lot to the background of the scene. They can and really set the mood as well with the lighting and shadows. Cinematographers and directors, if they are in sync, if they work well together, can make beautiful films. And that was evident in all of those Warner Brothers noir titles. Warner Brothers was sort of the smallest of the big studios, and they were very scrappy, and they made movies less expensively than MGM. You certainly did. They just didn't have the funds. They had really good talent though, and they did watch the bottom line and made a lot of money. And they would their big pictures were produced less expensively overall than the other studios, but they looked every bit as good. So Warner Brothers, I have a lot of. I know Jack Warner was there again, not the nicest person on earth, but Warner Brothers' talent was just second to none. And Warner Brothers sort of elevated film noir. Theirs were among the best, I think, and they put their bigger stars in noir films. Joan Crawford was in several noirs. She had been with MGM until the early 40s. Wanted out of her contract because she didn't like the roles that she was being given, and made a big comeback in a Warner Brothers movie, which is Mildred Pierce, another noir title. And she made a string of them for Warner Brothers. One of my favorite Joan Crawford noir titles is Sudden Fear, which is a fantastic movie. She's fallen in love with this younger man who is Jack Palance, and she slowly begins to find out that not only is he not in love with her, Jack Palance and his real girlfriend are going to kill her, going to kill Joan. So it's a great movie, and everybody in it's fantastic. Jack Palance, if you watch some of, I know later into his career he kind of developed a reputation for self-parody, perhaps. But early on in his career, he delivered really intense performances. He's just fantastic. He was capable of very, very good work. And this is one of those movies. I mean, he is just creepy as all get out in this film, and devious. He's just great in it. Everybody, Gloria Graham is another one of my favorite actresses. She was in a lot of noir films. There was just something about her, something about her charisma that just sort of lent itself to some of those noir titles that she was in. But Joan Crawford made some great noir films for Warner Brothers. Flamingo Road is another one with Zachary Scott that she's in. Sidney Greenstreet's in that as well because he was a Warner Brothers contract player. So you find him popping up in a lot of noir titles too.
Yeah, Jack Palance, as you mentioned, he had some very heroic and some villainous roles, and some where he was neither hero or villain, but he was a historic personage of great magnitude. I loved him in City Slickers, even. I think that's what. Yeah, he played his cowboy character to perfection in City Slickers.
Not only that, I remember, and this is a long time ago at this point, but I remember how much he relished sort of being famous again. When he kind of dropped down to all fours and did his push-ups at the Academy Awards, he did turn in a great performance. And like I said, he was an immensely talented man. He was in a lot of schlock, yes, but he kept working, and it came full circle for him. In the early 50s, when he came to prominence as an actor, he was already in his 30s. And like I said, turned in great performances, and then kind of slid into B movies, and rarely said no to a role. If the check cashed, Jack was there. But but we tend to forget that yes, these people are artists, but they also have bills to pay. They've got families. They've got house payments, they have car payments, just like the rest of us. And the life of an actor is difficult. You don't know where your next paycheck's coming from. You have to live. Yes, you have your instrument. And you want to be this great artist, but you also have to survive.
Mm-hmm.
And I think some talent doesn't always win out. Sometimes very talented people have a rough go of it, and he was one of them. But he kept working. He was in every film genre you can think of. I do think that his noir titles are some of the best. One of my favorite movies is Panic in the Streets, where he is a criminal that has the pneumonic plague, and the cops know that he has it, and they are trying to track him down. He sees that he's being followed by the cops, so he's actively trying to evade them. So it's a really interesting movie, the way it's set up. They're desperate to catch him, and he is not going to be caught. And he has no idea that he has to play. It's a fantastic movie. Another noir title that I highly recommend. And there again, he's not the hero in this. He's the antagonist. And to tell you the truth, I think those are the roles that Jack Palance did best.
Yes.
Now he fully capable. He had the acting talent to be the hero. I mean, it's not that he lacked any charisma or talent or anything like that. But I just think that the villainous roles for him are the ones where he could really shine, and he really seems to relish them. He really seems to enjoy them. And there again, he was a very good actor. He did a very good job in his films, no matter whether they were good or bad.
Yeah, I liked him in some of the schlockier movies too.
Oh yeah, very much. Yeah.
He elevated the schlockier movie by
Yes, he did.
being in it. And again, I enjoy schlocky movies, so
Me too.
it worked out quite well.
But Panic in the Streets is another, I think, seminal title in noir genre. Very good film, one of my favorites, as a matter of fact. But then again, I have a lot of noir films that are some of my favorites. Kiss Me Deadly is another one. I think we have the Criterion Collection DVD of that, I believe, because it's such a terrific film. Kiss Me Deadly stars Ralph Meeker, Cloris Leachman is in an early role. Cloris Leachman from the Mary Tyler Moore Show, Phyllis, Young Frankenstein. She's in it. Gabby Rogers. Oh golly, and who is the other actress that is in Kiss Me Deadly? Maxine Cooper. Okay, and Albert Decker is in it as well. And it's a bit like Panic in the Streets in that there is this. Gosh, I'm kind of at a loss to how to describe it. There's this suitcase that everybody, or briefcase that everybody is trying to get a hold of. And that is the main source of motivation for the plot. The person who, Gabby Rogers, is the person who finally does get it and opens it up, and it has this radiation in it, and it kills her. But it glows. It's very well. That was a horrible spoiler. I'm sorry if you haven't seen Kiss Me Deadly, because that comes at the end of it. But it is just, it's an amazing take on noir, and like I said, very very similar to Panic in the Streets, but just a mind blowing in, fantastic.
Noir might have a wider range than I had credited with.
Oh, it does.
Because I mostly detective and some horror is what my associations were. But now I'm thinking back, Ed Wood with Johnny Depp and Martin Landau. That was shot in a very noir style.
It is, but the characters are very different though. But it is shot. You're right. They do borrow a lot of those elements. And Ed Wood, he made some crime dramas of his own. The Sinister Urge was a crime drama. The Steve Reeves film Jailbait, the film that Steve Reeves was in. I'm not sure you could call that noir, but it's sort of for Ed Wood, I suppose it is.
Yeah, Ed Wood was quite a character. I'm waiting for us to get around to celebrating him on one of the shows.
Oh, most definitely. I'm a big Ed Wood fan, and I think I own his whole catalog. So
I
it's a
used
pretty
to have him.
Oh, you don't have it anymore?
No, things get lost over many moves.
Oh,
Even though for our past, we stayed in one place here for like a decade, and we're going to continue staying here. And we stayed in our house for about a decade in Pennsylvania. We've moved around a remarkable amount, and all sorts of stuff vanished along the way, including my Ed Wood collection. I think I still have Plan 9 from Outer Space, and I have the Ed Wood movie that has Johnny Depp and Martin Cornell in it.
We have been in the same house for 27 years, I think. And that also presents problems. Far from missing things, we have too much, way too much. However, I've become even more convinced that having my own physical media is the best thing.
Me too.
I've watched a lot of these streaming services delete content.
Yes.
To tell you the truth, content that I was beginning to think, well, these movies will always be there. Nope, they won't. And some films that I have on DVD have since run into rights issues, so you can't see those. And the only ones that you're really safe with, for the most part, I think, are the public domain titles, because I've noticed that some of the streaming services that shall remain nameless have been replacing content with public domain.
Yes.
Because they can say, oh, we've got 5,000 movies, but 4,500 of them you can see anywhere else.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
I learned that lesson
free.
with Kindle because I have a vast library. I still have a vast library of books, and despite Ida that destroyed a big chunk of my library, I still have more books than I could possibly ever read again. But when I was given a Kindle by my eldest son, I started getting rid of books because I could fit like 1,000 books in the palm of my hand. Then we had problems with Kindle, and I didn't have any access to all these books that I purchased or loaded the device with.
Mm.
And until that got straightened out, I started buying all the books I sold, and much more than I got for them, uh, to try to replace them. And I learned my lesson. So it's like physical media tops my list of things not to get rid of, because again, you never know.
That's true. And I'm very proud of our DVD collection, to tell you the truth. We have some. I don't think anybody else would be all that impressed with my DVD collection, but I am, because I've got some really bizarre, oddball stuff. Uh, and it's stuff that I like. So I don't care if anybody else is impressed by it or not. I'm also impressed by some of the books that we have. Um, since I was a child, I've been collecting film books, which publishers used to turn out, left and
Yes,
right, and of course that's gone. You know,
yes.
but I still have them. We still have them out. I still look at them, from time to time. I still consult them if I'm looking for information, because it's right there. It's all collected. I might be able to find it on the internet, but maybe not. You know, so like I said, I'm a big believer in physical media, because you just never know when your access to something's going to be cut off.
No, you never do. And my Conan collection was ravaged by this storm. And I had like a fairly complete collection of Conan. I didn't go back, until Weird Tales, but I had the from the early Lancer paperbacks onward, and from the early Marvel comics onward. And some folks have been sending me Conans. So my Conan collection is starting to replenish itself. And they recently started uh, writing Conan books again, because Conan's in the public domain now.
Hmm.
So I suspect that Conan's going to be making a comeback very soon in film and in other media.
I think public domain's a wonderful thing. Next year Mickey Mouse will be public domain,
Yes.
at least the old style Mickey. I don't know if the current version of Mickey with the white in the eyes. I don't know if that has a separate uh, trademark or not, but the old Steamboat Willie Mickey, the one with the half moon eyes, that's going to be public domain in January. So it'll be interesting to see what Disney does around.
Several superheroes, including Marvel and DC, well-known heroes, are also entering the public domain within the next few years, and that should be
Mhm.
interesting to see how that plays out. When anybody can make a Doctor Strange movie, or Spider-Man movie,
Well,
Batman movie.
while we're on that, my T-shirt has Universal Monsters on it, and they will be public domain in just about 3 or 4 years. So that's really, Frankenstein and Dracula, the movies,
Yes,
will be public domain. That is Universal. It has protected its monster franchise. Uh, they've they have fought off a lot of people when it comes to it, and I guess that's going to end pretty soon. I don't know if you're an amusement park fan or not, but Universal Florida is building a new park, a third park there in Orlando, and it's going to have a large Universal Monsters attraction. I think that'll
that'll
uh,
be great.
spur a lot of interest, and I think it's supposed to open in 2025, and we're planning to go. So,
They came out with a Universal Monster tarot deck recently too, but they didn't seem to have the image rights for Dracula, Frankenstein, Carlos Frankenstein, and a
mm,
bunch of other things. So my wife is very knowledgeable in such things, all things Universal. And there were some scenes she couldn't recognize on the card. She recognized most of them,
mm,
what scene they were from, but she couldn't recognize them all. And
interesting.
if you're expecting Bela Lugosi and Boris Karloff's uh, versions, they were absent from the card. So that was a disappointment.
I wonder if that's because of Sarah Karloff and Bela Lugosi Jr., because they have certain rights to their parents' images. So it's probably that. That's just a guess. I don't know for sure.
That's what my wife guessed, and that's also what several reviewers of the deck guessed that
Mhm.
basically that had something to do with it.
Yeah. Have you been to Universal Hollywood?
No, I had an opportunity to go when I was out west, but I didn't go, and I regretted not going ever since. And when I went out west, it was Conan was still an exhibit there,
Mm.
like a Conan exhibit, which I would have loved to see. But again, you figure it'll always be there, but then you might not always be there. So
Well, but with amusement parks, you don't know because things that you love sometimes go away.
yeah,
Um, I haven't been to Universal Hollywood in a while. I'd say it's been at least a dozen years or so, maybe even longer than that. But I assume it's still there. I don't know, but there is a Universal Monsters attraction in Universal Hollywood that is brilliantly done. It is so much fun. They've got they have Frankenstein's lab set up, and it looks just like what you saw in James Whale's movie. It's just total immersion. It is fabulous. The last time we were there, I was walking through it, and you're not allowed to photograph anything, which I get, so I did. And I am just sort of like I'm in Frankenstein's lab and looking around and just into it. And somehow one of the actors was dressed as the Wolfman, very convincingly as well. And he scared the crap out of me because I turned around and there he was, and he looked good. I mean, as the Wolfman, he ended up hugging me. so, so I was just like, oh. It was so much fun. I am dying to go back there and do it again, and I'm hoping uh, the new park in new Universal Park in Florida has something similar. I understand that they might. Um, I don't think it would be quite as good as the one in Hollywood because in Hollywood you've got all of these out of work actors who are more than willing to work at Universal and to work, work on their acting jobs. And the guy who was dressed as the Wolfman, like I said, looked fantastic.
we should do a bunch of specials like panels on characters like Dracula and the Wolfman and Frankenstein. And Don Glut has been interviewed on the show a number of times, and Don Glut does a lot with the monsters. He
Mm.
recently started writing a comic book series where in the first issue, Machiste encounters Dracula. And
Oh, really? Okay.
yes, unfortunately, subsequent issues haven't come out yet, but that one came out. And he's done a lot with monsters in publication and in films and so forth. And then we have a couple of people on board who I haven't talked to in a while, but they worked in the Dark Shadows conventions. Athena was in the Dark Shadows conventions as part of the Collinswood Players. So they did a lot of skits on vampires and Barnabas and so on. So we start putting together like shows looking at Dracula or Frankenstein or the creature from a bunch of different angles. And I think that would be fun.
It would. It would. Anyway, and speaking of Dark Shadows, the matriarch on Dark Shadows, Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, played by Joan Bennett. Joan Bennett was in some great film noir titles in the 1940s. She's in Scarlet Street, which I think is just fantastic mid 1940s noir title, and a later title for her is called Highway Dragnet. It's 1954. Mary Beth Hughes is in it, and I think Richard Conte is in it as well. And just, like I said, so many actors did cycle through those noir films. Some of them made more of a career of it than others, obviously. I mean, Humphrey Bogart, it was his career for a long time. Peter Lorre, like I said earlier, did a number of them as well. Gloria Grahame, Joan Crawford did a lot of noir.
Now, you've mentioned a lot of noir films, or I've mentioned a bunch of noir-like or noir-light type of media.
Jason, yeah.
Since we're running out of time, can you get, if somebody wanted to explore film noir, what three films would you recommend that they start with that would immerse them in the experience so much that they might want to explore more?
The Maltese Falcon would be the first one.
Okay.
Uh, I think Casablanca is a good example, but I don't think it's as good as the Maltese Falcon. Um, Now it's wonderful. It has a romance in it, blah blah blah, it is a great film, very watchable. But I would pick the Maltese Falcon over that, especially if you wanted to see a Humphrey Bogart film. Another one that I would mention to somebody wanting to explore more of it is called The Killing. It was a 1956 film with a great cast: Sterling Hayden, who made a number of noir films, Colleen Gray, and she's in Nightmare Alley and several other noir titles. Marie Windsor, Elijah Cook Jr. Um, and if you ever watched Ben Casey as a kid,
Yes.
Vince Edwards came his first films were he's always a heavy in a noir film. He's always a criminal in it, and he is in this. It's a really interesting film too. The plot revolves around this heist that these seven people uh, are going to try to pull off, but you can't really trust a bunch of people. You can't trust criminals, and the wife of one of the criminals and Ben Casey decide that they find out about the heist. So they decide that they're going to let the seven people do the heist, carry it through, and then they're going to kill them and then take all the money. So it's a great movie.
Well, thank you.
it it ends well for nobody. It is classic noir, very well shot, some very disturbing scenes in it, but really a terrific film. And finally, the third one I would probably want people to see would probably be Kiss Me Deadly with Ralph Meeker. I'm a Ralph Meeker fan. I do like his work a lot, but that film it's deeply disturbing. Um, and it affects me as much as a horror film would in terms of kind of being freaked out by it. It definitely produces an emotional reaction in you, and you get caught up in the story, but because it is so interesting, and everybody in it is just so disgusting. You get to see sort of the dark side of the human psyche in noir, and people who might ordinarily be very run of the mill, usually maybe even upstanding citizens at one time, will do things in certain circumstances that are just horrible. Yeah, I guess anybody's capable of it.
So it's a good mirror to look into. Um,
Yes.
and how can people enter your world? How can they find the legendary institution that is Brian's Drive-In Theater, and how can they get in contact with you?
They can go to briansdriveintheater.com. That's Brian with an I. Just point your browser to that, and you'll find a drive-in theater website with many different sections. One of them is film noir, as a matter of fact. Most of the actor pages do have media content for people to watch. Some have trailers, some have films, some have television appearances, some have all three, depending on what is public domain. Um, and that's all served by archive.org. And there's a lot of content on archive.org as well. If you want to interact with me via social media, the platform that I am most comfortable using is Facebook, and that's the one I'm on most often. I am on the platform formerly known as Twitter as well, now branded as X, which is kind of bizarre, but
Yes.
whatever. Um, I'm a lurker there, so I check Twitter every day, but I don't really interact with anybody on Twitter. I just lurk on that. I do interact a lot though on Facebook, and if you're on Facebook, look me up.
And how do you want to spend your birthday tomorrow?
Well, I have two classes to teach early tomorrow afternoon. And then some friends are taking me to a very nice dinner about an hour from here in Maryland.
Sounds wonderful.
It does. I'm really looking forward to it. This isn't a big birthday for me, meaning that I'm not reaching like a milestone birthday or anything like that. So I'm just kind of letting it happen and happy to be here, happy to be this age, um, and happy to be retired. I got to. We were talking earlier before the segment began, and retirement has just brought me some inner peace that I never thought I would have. It's just been a blessing. I can't even describe it.
I can say the same. Despite many of the new challenges, I've also come at peace with very many things, and it is hard to describe, but it is there.
And it's wonderful not having something hold you. I'm pretty good about motivating myself. I don't need a paycheck necessarily to do that. But not being beholden to somebody else is such a wonderful thing.
Yes, it is.
Being your own boss is amazing, I gotta say.
Very, very true. And thank you again for being on the planet. I'm certainly glad that you're here and you're celebrating birthdays.
Oh, thank
And
you.
I look forward to our next conversation.
Same here.
And this will be up tonight. I will put it up so that it's available for Brian's birthday. Thanks for
Oh,
listening. And you want to close with something?
no, but I've already had several people wish me happy birthday on Facebook. People, visitors to the website, and I can't. I try to respond to everyone, and I can't thank everybody enough.
So you've thanked them here.
Great.
Thank you very much. Give my regards to Greg, and I look forward to our next conversation, which will be as soon as I stop the film.
Well, have a good evening, Hercules.
You too.